It's its own standalone film. You could watch this and have never seen any of the Ghostbusters, and it will still hit you emotionally. All right, welcome to the podcast. I am joined by Reece Taylor, a reporter at the Oakland Press and blog contributor to the Successful Screenwriter podcast. Reece, thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, today we are going to do a film analysis on Ghostbusters Afterlife, which I'm super excited about and really appreciate you joining me today. All right, so I'm going to hit you with the log line. You ready?
Go for it.
All right, when a single mom and her two kids arrive in a small town, they begin to discover their connection to the original Ghostbusters and the secret legacy their grandfather left behind. All right, give me your real quick first thoughts.
First thoughts on that film were, one, it was an amazing fan film. It was literally a love letter to the fans in the original film.
Right.
That I appreciate. And on top of that, it really told its own story. It went its own direction with it. And it went with something that I've seen with a lot of films lately, is that it goes straight from the original, and this being a direct sequel.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. So it was directed by Jason Reitman, and he was also one of the writers on as well as Gil Kenan and Dan Aykroyd, and Jason Reitman, the son of Ivan Reitman, who directed the original Ghostbusters. What I agree with you. I think it is its own film. It's its own standalone film. You could watch this and have never seen any of the Ghostbusters, and it will still hit you emotionally, which is really hard to pull off. Of course, there's a lot of fan service in it. And I thought maybe we could talk about that for a minute before we really kind of dive into concept and theme and character. If we could talk about the fact that for some reason, this film is really divisive around, fans versus critics. I mean, the critic scores on this film isn't as great as the fans. Fans are loving this film, but critics are calling it, derivative and things like that. I have to tell you, as somebody who works in story, this is a solid film.
Well, here's the thing. And when they're talking about the whole thing about it being derivative, first thing that came to my mind was The Force Awakens. Which,
okay, all right.
And what I mean by that is, I thought the story was told fine. I thought it was a good story, but a lot of people had a problem with it, saying that this is just a repeat of the original, or it's something that they've seen before already. Which, us working in stories and then working in film, we understand that there's not a lot of stories that can be told.
Yeah,
it's all about plotting, which I felt like this one was plotted well.
I agree. I mean, listen, watching this film and even taking away my prior knowledge of the 80s, which I'm very familiar with, having lived it, I laughed, I cried, I was on an emotional journey. And if you can do that to me in a film, and this is what I do for a living, that's a powerful film for me. And I thought this film did what it needed to do for the fans, but it also had a strong theme, and the theme was dealing with loss, right?
Right. Now, I'm gonna also say this. This is one of the distinctions that I think a lot of people struggle with when it comes to films.
Yeah.
And in Ghostbusters, this one I think is the most obvious, which is they're expecting Ghostbusters to be about them fighting ghosts, which this was, I'm not gonna say it was a subplot,
right?
But the idea of them fighting ghosts took back seat to what the actual theme was, which was dealing with grief and dealing with loss.
Absolutely.
So you have to be able to separate the fact that it's kind of like Jurassic Park. The theme about it, the theme of Jurassic Park is literally future and progression versus the past. And they told that through the characters, which Alan Grant was obsessed with the past, John Hammond was obsessed with the future, and between the two of them kind of met in the middle.
Right. And they grounded Jurassic Park with another theme of family, right? Right. So by doing that, by characterizing it that way, you're able to hook into this, primal root that everybody understands. And it's the same thing with Ghostbusters Afterlife. They're dealing with loss, but it's not like you had mentioned before we got on the show. You had mentioned, well, they weren't dealing with the 5 stages. They were dealing with coming to terms after the 5 stages and like moving on with your life. And that's exactly what this is. And everybody's had to deal with that. We've all had to deal with loss, especially right now with COVID. We've all lost someone that we love. We've all lost someone that we've cared about because of this thing. And to sit there in an audience and watch this film with characters who feel real, characters who feel grounded, that have, things like abandonment issues that have played out in their lives, that because they're that well developed as a character, go through this journey that we have all going through right now. I can identify with these characters, and I think it was just so beautifully done. And then throw in the concepts of ghosts on there. Why not?
Right. I mean, and plus, when you're dealing with loss, a lot of people always go to ghosts. So that actually does play into what the theme of it is.
Yeah.
And even more so, just like you're dealing with the grief of of losing a loved one. And are we going to go into spoilers? Because I feel
we do spoilers on this show. So if you're listening to we're analyzing. I can't really analyze without spoilers. So I think it's fine. If you haven't watched the film yet, go watch the film and then come back and finish the episode.
Thank you for putting that out there, because here we go.
All right.
Obviously, it's going to be about Egon's death. This is Egon's family, his daughter and his grandchildren. So you're going to deal with the grief from him up and leaving his family, which come to find out, he was fighting the villain from the first one on what's going to be an even larger scale.
Yeah.
I don't know how do you top New York City?
Yeah.
But there's ways to do it, and this one did it.
Yeah, now, they did it without going spectacle, right? They didn't have to have the flair of New York City. They went to the exact opposite, which is like the countryside. But to do that, you then have to ground it in family.
Got to ground it in family. But another smart thing that they did with it was by putting it in such a small environment, it does something that a lot of people had problems with the original, which was you don't really understand how powerful Gozer is.
Right.
And in this one, Gozer's right there. I'm going to say it because I don't really know if it's a man or woman. Like that's one of the things
it's a god. I think that's fair. Yeah.
It's intimate. It's there. You're feeling it. You see it, and by you actually interacting with it, you understand how powerful this is by sacrificing how many lights and how large New York City is.
Right.
It puts you one-on-one with this thing. And now you're looking at kids and adults dealing with this, like, how do you beat something this powerful when it's just me? When you're in a small town, it's pretty much a small environment versus something that's larger than life. Which, in a way, you can say that's what grief is. It's something that's in many ways larger than life. It's larger than what we can understand.
No, I agree. It is, but going back to Gozer, played by Olivia Wilde, I don't know if you picked that up, but I thought that was an awesome cameo.
To look her up afterwards. I didn't realize that was her.
It was her. I was like, wow, that's awesome. So, but yeah, I think Gozer is exceptionally powerful, and to layer in the grief there, and to show Egon, who's arguably, my favorite Ghostbuster.
Oh, he's the best Ghostbuster.
He was
let's be real.
He was just awesome.
Let's take that claim right now. He's the best Ghostbuster.
Harold Ramis was absolutely, he's just brilliant. And to deal with the aftermath, and then to have his granddaughter, who is, so well played, and comes off very similar to how he is, and to make his presence in the film via things like the spotlight, where they were creating emotion behind the spotlight based on what it was focusing on, how they would show it hover over her like a grandfather would do, who was like helping you assist things, that
was a mentor.
It was brilliant. Yeah, it was just brilliant to see something like this, an inanimate object, give an emotion, and to do it in a way that you're like, God, this is like a master class on creating emotion through the scene, through a shot. And that was absolutely brilliant.
And I think that's one of the things that they were trying to really establish in Ghostbusters Afterlife was this was a story about emotion. If you can't emotionally invest into the story, you don't have a good story.
Right.
You're emotionally invested in the characters. And honestly, even though it's kind of sort of, but not really a twist that Egon's their grandfather.
Yeah.
They also made it so obvious that he was from the start that you're like, okay, they're not going to try to like push a twist saying, oh wait, this is actually his family. They're jumping in saying, okay, pick up on the clues and let's tell the story that way so they can figure it out as you do.
But when I listen to you say that, that's where the disconnection was in The Force Awakens, right? Because Rey is disconnected from the original, heroes, to say. I mean, she grows up in a sand dune, and it's very similar to Luke's upbringing, but there's no direct relationship there. In fact, it takes 3 movies before we discover the hidden meaning. As great as that twist is for Rey, we don't know any of that going into it. So there is no heritage there. There's no lineage there for us to connect to the original trilogy, which is why it just felt like a reboot. And I think that could be one of the issues there. Had they tied that in with any of the other characters, we might have had a little bit more feeling going into The Force Awakens versus this one.
And that's one of the things. It comes down to plotting, as we were saying earlier.
Yeah.
And one of the forms of plotting with it is looking at the characters and trying to figure out, how do I incorporate them into the story as early as possible? What's something that we can do that's going to draw them into the plot?
Right.
Rey always felt like she was out of the plot. She always felt like somebody who, by happenstance, just happened to have, just got the Force.
Right.
Whereas this one, you see, okay, she's highly intelligent. She's constantly working on something. She's constantly doodling, or
she's keyed into the plot line. Absolutely. I mean, she is representing thematically what's going on. I mean, which is dealing with loss, right? She's a weird, quirky kid, totally thinks she's, just adorable and helpful from the get-go. She's trying to fix the power in the apartment so that she can keep doing her experiments. I mean, so how do you not like that character, right? So you automatically get right behind her. And then you pair in the brother, and then the fact that they have these little familiar sayings they say to each other, like, hey, don't be yourself, which is hilarious because no parent would ever say that to their kid, but they secretly think it. So like I'm the father.
The perfect example of that.
Yeah, I'm the father of a gifted child. My child is brilliant. I love him. He's quirky. It's awesome. And he is his own personality. And I can see how it affects his daily life. I would never say don't be yourself, but to hear that coming from a parent on the screen, I'm like, oh God, that just hits home. So like little things like this that are grounding it into a realistic character and a realistic family dynamic is awesome. And you have all of these other characters that are bringing out the best in each other. And one thing that I noticed is you have Egon's granddaughter, and then her best friend, who's Phoebe, her best friend that she makes, his name is Podcast.
Yeah.
And so Podcast literally narrates everything. Like he's in a podcast, or if he was narrating the script, he's narrating it. And here's the brilliance between these two characters. You have Phoebe, who is very much an introvert. She is within herself. She doesn't want to be extroverted in order to create and communicate with other people. Her brother has convinced her to tell really bad dad jokes, which is so adorable. And it works, and they play that throughout the plot. But Podcast is an extrovert, right? So he is constantly saying everything that's on his mind. So you pair those two characters together and you get this beautiful dynamic through the story between this extrovert and this introvert, where they are constantly lovingly challenging each other and are perfectly fit. And to see that on screen work so well is just, it's just beauty in motion.
And also they played something true to life, which is every introvert, me and you both understand this.
Yeah.
For some reason, there's always that one extrovert that just clings onto him and says, okay, no, we're dragging this to the lake.
They take
And
us under their wing. Yes, it's true.
like, please, God, no. And that's beautifully done throughout the film. Also, something that you did note that also stemming off of last time when I was talking about how how you had a bit of foreshadowing. She's working on the power in the apartment to continue her experiments.
Yeah.
At the end, she fixes the power in the at the farm.
It's brilliant. It's so good. Like when you just look at that type of foreshadowing carried throughout the entire script, but even the dad jokes, Reece,
Right.
even the dad jokes, they start out with the dad jokes because she's trying to make friends. She ends up saying dad jokes to Gozer, the destroyer, right? As a distraction. So even that, like you take every little thing and you run it through the whole story, and it becomes important to the point where it always pays off. They're not just loading things to load in there to waste time to get to 90 minutes. Everything had a purpose, and that is the point of a killer script. Every single scene, every single line has a purpose. It's not just filler. And this film shows exactly why. I would say any film student or screenwriter out there who wants to see, how do I write that killer script? You go and watch Ghostbusters Afterlife, and it shows you how to do it.
Exactly. And even with that, going back to the whole idea of this being kind of a fan film.
Yeah.
Throughout the first two, Egon always told dad jokes. One of my favorite scenes is actually in Ghostbusters 2, which I don't care. No one says, I love that movie. And one of my favorite moments was actually when they were in the courthouse, when they turned on the protein,
the proton pack.
When they turned on the proton packs, mouth got away from me.
That's fine.
First one, dough. Second, Ray.
Yeah.
Egon.
Yeah.
Like stuff like that. Just that dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
It was again told through Phoebe.
Yeah, I love it. It was so good. And then of course the big twist at the end, which was awesome. And so satisfying. And brave, because I didn't think they were gonna go there. Especially with the intro where you never see the face because obviously it's a double. I didn't think they'd go there. They went there, and I mean, I don't think there's a dry eye in the theater. It was just, God, it hits you. And it was just beautiful. So, all right. Any final notes on this? I think we've pretty much broken this thing down. The subplots were there as well with her mother and Paul Rudd again, dealing with loss and trying to find a way into this world. So I think that was played out as well. Paul Rudd, what an awesome addition. He even did a couple of Rick Moranis impressions at one point, because I thought that was super hilarious.
Well, we do have to mention he is technically the sexiest man alive, according to People magazine.
All right. We'll put that on record. There you go. My goodness.
And also, this is another funny note that I found out when I was actually going through the IMDb for it. You know who played the body double for Egon?
No.
It was actually the warden from Shawshank Redemption.
Oh, okay. Cool. That's awesome. So yeah, a little fun fact there. Let's see. I think they're setting it up for another one, and if they do, I'm open for it. I really want to see where this goes. I'd be very happy if they brought the trilogy back. And I think another reason why this one resonates over the 2016 version is the 2016 was a reboot. It was a straight on reboot. I didn't dislike the 2016 one. I thought it was funny. I thought it was just a completely different film. It was it had musical numbers. It was very lighthearted, and like that was where it went for. And Ghostbusters traditionally had comedy beats, but it had a little bit of darkness to it. It had a little bit, like I think of the fridge scene in the first one. You go, that's terrifying. So I think, or even the librarian scared the hell out of you when I was a kid. So
it's still awesome.
Yeah. So, but the 2016, it just went full laughs. And I think that might have been where the where the disconnect was. I know people are like, oh, it's female Ghostbusters. I don't have a problem with that. I thought they were all hilarious. I just thought it was a different um, revision of what was already set up as for the tone of the script and the film in the first place. So this one adheres more to what we're used to. So I can see why it hits better, and then why critics are like, oh, it's rehashing the same. I said, no, it's just keeping the same tone as the first one. So this podcast is brought to you by the Script Summit Screenplay Contest, where you can win up to $1,000 cash, or even the chance to get signed by a talent manager. We've had 2 writers last year got signed by talent managers who have stuff right now actually going to production companies and studios, which is super exciting. I know that you've been part of it in the past as well.
Yep, won a couple of times, and it's still one of my favorite competitions I've ever entered. It's a great experience.
Yeah, and we have a whole bunch of seminars that we host locally in Michigan at the end of the festival season. So it's definitely something worth checking out at scriptsummit.com. And Reece, I just want to thanks again for joining us. I think this is awesome. I thought we gave a really good perspective on Ghostbusters Afterlife that I'm not seeing out there. I'm seeing people either hate it or they love it, but I like the fact that we're able to break it down and show like this is why it works.
And I appreciate that too. And I appreciate you having me out here. One of the big things is when looking at film, there's always this idea of, and I know this might be a bit off subject, there's always this idea of either good or bad. And
Right.
I think the big thing that you got to think, this is the entertainment industry.
Yeah.
I think we should throw out the notion of, is it good or is it bad? Because whether it works or doesn't work is a whole different conversation than good or bad. I think the big conversation is it entertaining? If you're entertained by it, doesn't matter. And I was 100% entertained by it.
I think you're absolutely right, man. I mean, art is subjective. Look, there's a commercial aspect to filmmaking. We can all agree on that. I mean, they make it to make money, but it is still an art form, so somebody's going to watch it. They're not going to like it. My question is, do you know why you don't like it? Because if you don't know why you don't like it, then we should have that conversation to figure out what's not working. Do you like something? Okay, why? I want to know why. If you don't know why, then we need to figure that out. And so that's what we're doing on this podcast. Why does it work? Why does it not work? And we break that down. And I think it's awesome.